Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, for joining this webinar today. Sorry for the delay, a few minutes delay, but I think we'll try to cover up this lost time and within an hour. So today's topic is from observation to resolution. I think all of us know that uh, you have an observation when a regulatory body visit your facility and they provide you a certain time frame to respond back, right? Uh, that result into two things. Either you get 43, which is just an observation, and sometimes you get warning letters as well. So uh, we are going to talk about how you can manage 43 A's, right? Or prepare yourself before the audit, as well as what you're supposed to do once you get a 43A. There is a certain timeline you need to respond um, them appropriately. You build in strategy. So Lauren and I will talk about how you can effectively utilize your time and respond them appropriately so that your business is up and running. So in this webinar, there are a few things which some of you who have been a regular attendee, so they would know, but I'll repeat them again. So all of you will be muted during this webinar, but you can put your questions in the chat box. And once we go to Q&A section, we can pick those questions from chat box and answer. In case you have additional questions which you could not ask in this webinar due to time, or your questions came later on, feel free to send those questions to contact@saracasolutions.com, and somebody from us would answer your question. Great, so let's jump on. So a bit about me. I'm Kuldeep, founder and CEO of Saraca Solutions. I have been into medical device industry for around 25 years now. Started as a design engineer, uh, moved to quality, regulatory, clinical, the recent part of my career. I have worked with large players, which are listed here. I have also worked with mid-sized companies and the startups. So there's a good mix of experience working with various size of the companies, because their expectations of the project when they outsource and when they take consulting advice from companies like us is different. So it's very important to understand uh, the expectation of various customer types. I have very strong experience working on medtech, pharma. I've been active in this field, so keep looking at what's going on in the market. What are the best ways to really respond to 43 A's? How do you prepare well? We have come up with a lot of best practices to face the audit, what to say, what not to say, and also help uh, customers responding appropriately to make sure that you understand what regulatory body is really expecting. Many times you have to do you're doing more than what is expected, and on a certain area which is not of a concern for them. So you have to really focus on something which is a big concern for them. I have a global experience, so obviously US FDA, UMDR, PMDA in Japan, TGA in Australia, MHRA in UK, and other regulatory bodies around the world. I have done extensive work on 62304, which is a favorite subject for me to look at your software and evaluate the risk on your software. Whether software is an independent software, it's part of a electromechanical system. I've done a lot of work recently to upgrade our US customers, quality management system to adopt, ISO 13485. So that's about me. I would request my co-panelist Lauren to talk about herself and move forward on the subsequent slides.
Thank you so much, and welcome everybody, and thank you for joining. My name is Lauren Jackson. I have a compliance history across multiple industries, aerospace, finance, as well as the last roughly 15 years has been in medical device, global regulatory at Medtronic and Dexcom, looking at compliance across the organization and focus on new and changing regulations. I recently wrote several chapters for the RAPS guide, Medical Device Fundamentals. So if you're studying for your RAC, you may see my name there. And I have deep knowledge on 483 and warning letter remediation from lived experience at those organizations and going through the process and seeing what it takes to get from good to great.
Excellent.
Our agenda for today, we're going to talk about the Form 483 and warning letters and sort of the differences between that FDA Form 83 and a warning letter. We're going to touch on the ELSA, which is the FDA's new AI tool that they've implemented and the impacts of that. We'll look at regulatory insights from the FDA dashboard and some typical compliance gaps that lead to an observation on the FDA 483 and in warning letters. We want to walk you through some of the steps that you can take after you receive a Form 483, and then touch on best practices for responding to an FDA warning letter. And then I will give it back to my fabulous co-host, who will talk about the steps to avoid receiving a Form 483 and the impact of noncompliance on an organization and case study, and then their expertise, Saraca's expertise in FDA 483s and warning letters. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. So Form 483, or you will most likely just hear the term a 483. And the reason is that on the physical paperwork, the FDA comes in, and when they are writing down their notes about your company, it's on a form, which is numbered 483. And so the term of art has just become 483. We got a 483. Well, what does that mean exactly? So after the FDA comes in and they audit you, they will document on this form their observations of any potential gaps in, right, your GMP, your QMS. It's not an official regulatory action at that point, but it highlights their concerns, requiring the company to respond with CAPAs, right, with corrective action plans to address and identify issues. If the response to the 483 is inadequate, or those observations, violations remain uncorrected, this issue may escalate. If it does, that's when you receive a warning letter. So a warning letter is when the health authority, in this case the FDA, issues a formal notice indicating significant unresolved regulatory noncompliances. This progression shows an increasing severity and the expectation for prompt and effective corrective action by the manufacturer. So Form 483, right? A 483 represents an opportunity to proactively resolve issues. And while a warning letter indicates that the FDA now expects urgent, verifiable corrective action. Let's talk a little bit about these two things and the steps that need to happen, right? When do you get a form? When do you get a 483? So Your health authority, the FDA, has come in, they've inspected you, they have in the room most likely talked about and brought up different concerns, right? And asked for documentation. And at the end, they note their observed noncompliances, right? This is why you hear, oh, the observations on the Form 83 that we received. Oh, our 483 had this many observations versus the FDA warning letter. So you get your 483, they list out your noncompliances, their observations of your noncompliances, and it's your opportunity to really address that with your agency. Now, it's not legally binding, but it indicates possible violations. They are now more searchable and publicly available through the FDA inspection records. It's an initial signal, as we spoke about before, for corrective action, and it's tied to a 15-day window where you have to respond voluntarily, but you need to respond in that 15-day window. An internal CAPA is required, which means your organization initiates processes for corrective actions. And it's an early opportunity in this process to course correct. The regulatory message is you need to fix this. The FDA warning letter comes if your response to the 483, the agency doesn't feel addressed the issues, they find it inadequate, or they find it lacking, then it's an official enforcement communication with potential legal implications. It's publicly available on the FDA's website, and the severity is it's an escalated response due to unresolved or serious compliance issues. Again, that window starts, it's a mandatory this time written response within 15 working days. And depending on the risk classification of your device, it may delay approvals, trigger re-inspections, or affect licensing. The message, the regulatory message from it is you failed to fix it, and now it's serious. So at the top of the agenda, we mentioned ELSA. Now, the FDA has just recently announced implementing their AI tool. And what you're seeing here on this slide is a screenshot of the new FDA dashboard, data dashboard. I cannot tell you, I can't impress upon you what an amazing leap forward this is. We've been in the industry a long time. And the FDA, the interactions, and the way the data was presented from the FDA, it used to be screen after screen of basically an Excel sheet, just lines of data, lines of data. They've now taken that and put it into this ELSA tool, and it is a quantum leap forward in what is available, what's available for the public sector to see, what's available for them, the agency themselves to be able to see and process. It gives them faster risk score updates, rapid prioritization for inspection. They are taking your complaint handling, right? They're taking your complaints that you need to make the FDA aware of, and they're putting it in their tool. And they are using that information to help drive and point to where they should inspect. All of the information that you've sent them over the years is now available at the touch of their fingertips. I can't strongly enough suggest that you go and you start taking a look at this. It is a it's not an incremental shift, it is a huge perspective shift. When you go on this dashboard, you're able to look at different organizations, and they've got from 2010 until now, they've got 15 years worth of data. I can't imagine, well, I can only begin to imagine what their AI tool is telling them. with the data that they have. So it's a big game changer.
I agree with you, Lauren. And I think this is really fantastic. Lauren and I spent some time last week while we was just putting it together. It's really fantastic. I think earlier we used to get confused to which page of FDA we have to go to find a certain data. Now they have combined everything at one place. You don't have to download Excel sheets and do your reporting and analysis. And as Lauren said, it's really fantastic. It's not just an incremental. It's just mind-blowing. They have used a good use of their data to put into AI, and you have dashboard. You don't have to really create charts to present to your teams for even for training. So everything is there.
And when you think of the data that you've shared with the FDA in the last 15 years and their ability to synthesize it and share it back to you, it's amazing. Right here, this slide, this is directly from the FDA data dashboard site, right? We asked to look at the foreign and domestic inspections. I think we can all see that huge dip during the pandemic in 2021. And they were just starting to sort of climb out of that hole. Uh, the other chart, again, you can see that huge dip. So these are the inspections over the year and then the classifications. No action indicated, voluntary action indicated, right? So what's that? That's your 483 versus your official action indicated, which is your warning letter. And you see, even though there was that precipitous fall off during the pandemic, they started to dig out. Yeah. And then I would say with the change in the environment for our regulatory experts and the FDA and people who are following US politics, you can see that really start to shift the lens again, right? So they go back up and then they start to fall off a little bit. And it'll be interesting to see after this shutdown what the impact is on the final numbers in the US. Again, from the dashboard, an incredible tool. My background is in medical device. And when I look at this, I think to myself, oof, medical device is absolutely the focus. Even if we start and we look at the where no actions are indicated, there are 27,000 records for medical device versus 17,000 for drugs and 25,000 for biologics. So it gives you an idea of where they're focusing their energies, what they're looking at. And then when you look at where the official action was indicated, again, medical devices at the leaderboard. Now, at this point, we've caught up, uh, right? Drugs is at 2,700 and med device is at 2,800, and biologics only count for 288. Those are numbers that they should be proud of. But let's take a look at their citations. What are they finding? When you get a Form 483, what's most likely to be observed? And you can see that a medical device here, the lack of or inadequate procedures is the number one area. The next area are inadequate complaint procedures. And it's those two big buckets before you get to drugs. And where drugs, again, procedures not in writing or fully followed. And then bio research, protocol, and compliance. Back to devices for lack of written MDR procedures. Again, that's your complaints. Devices, purchasing controls, devices, inadequate process validation, devices, non-conforming product, lack or inadequate procedures around your non-conforming product, devices documentation, and then drugs, their investigations of discrepancies or failures. It really gives you a lens into what they're focusing on and where as an organization you need to ensure you're well prepared. This digs into that a little bit more. For those of you who haven't had the opportunity yet to sit across the table from members of the FDA as they ask you questions, I can tell you one of the first things that they look at when they come in your organization is they're going to ask to see your CAPA records. At one point, it was 50%. Now I think it's 35% of the findings come directly from your own company's CAPAs. This is both good news and bad news, right? This is great news in that it's a signal that your organization is doing the right thing and your organization knows where they need to improve. It's a bad thing in that if they're finding problems and observations in your CAPAs, it means your business isn't doing yet what it needs to do to swiftly and adequately resolve those issues that you've internally identified. Complaint handling, again, I think that this, right, we saw in our previous slides that complaint handling is a large area for observations. But when I look at it through the lens of this ELSA tool, they're more tuned in and focused on this data point because this is the data you feed directly to the FDA. And they want to make sure it's top quality. And that information we know is going into their AI tool and helping drive their strategy. So they're going to be looking very closely at your complaint handling procedures and your reporting. Design controls, we saw in the last graph, right? The inadequate procedures, poor record keeping, process validation, lack of employee training, but also your supplier purchasing and controls is an area that they will dig into. Okay, so you've gotten a 483. What are some things you need to know, right? You need to respond within that 15 business days. It's voluntary, but you want to get your response. If you've gotten a 483, that means that there are outstanding issues that maybe you haven't thoroughly spoken to in the room. This is not time to necessarily continue that conversation of defending your organization. This is more of a time where you want to start looking at it through the lens of, we've heard you, we've understood, you've got this concern, and this is our robust plan, right? And that's why we talk about implementing corrective actions. You want to begin immediately remediating, you want to document all your actions thoroughly, and send that off to the FDA and say, this is our plan to fix this. So the FDA will review that response and determine if it's adequate. And as you see, they will classify either as no action indicated versus official action indicated versus volunteer action indicated. Possible FDA follow-up, they may issue a warning letter if issues persist, or if they feel that you have not adequately taken action to address the observation. So if you're still in that mindset where you're defending what you're doing versus in the mindset of correcting what they've observed, those are often when you get a warning letter. The resolution, it may, and the FDA may let you know that they plan to reinspect, to verify corrections. And for resolution, the FDA, if they accept your corrective actions, then your compliance status is restored. It's not escalated to that warning letter. Let's say you got the 483, there were observations, they came back, They've read what you've submitted and they've said, we're going to escalate this to a warning letter. Again, and I cannot stress this strongly enough, you want to, even after just a Form 483, if you feel that you haven't, if you get a warning letter, you absolutely want to bring in somebody from the outside. You want to bring in a different mindset. You need to bring in somebody who's going to give you that shift in perspective and say, this is what they're seeing, right? You want to acknowledge responsibility and summarize their concerns. This point is incredibly important because between language and people's different perspectives, you want to restate clearly what your understanding is of the observation. This is your chance to align with the FDA and get their input. No, we meant this. Yes, we meant that. No, that doesn't, right? This is your communication panel. And you want to bring your regulatory team into the room because they are used to responding and communicating with your health authority directly with the FDA. That's their skill set. You're going to want to implement and issue specific CAPAs with assigned teams and timelines. You're going to want to strengthen your controls throughout and update SOPs and your audits, internal audits and trainings, and verify effectiveness using metrics like audit logs and deviation trends. Again, you'll see here at the bottom, but I would put it at the top, engage experts. Engage. This is when you want to bring in somebody from the outside and leverage their thinking. Steps to avoid, right? You want to stay compliant and current with FDA regulations. You want to make sure that you're always aligning processes with the FDA's regulations, but also industry standards. Data integrity, keep your records accurate and complete, and CAPAs, 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 CAPAs. They're going to come in, they're going to ask to look at your CAPAs. You want to make sure not only are you identifying areas for improvement, but that you are quickly addressing them.
Thanks, Lauren. I really appreciate you talking about these very important points about 43 and warning letters. So I'll take this slide. So this talks about, uh, have a 43 audit, right, which you have received a 43 form, as Lauren talked about, and you have uh, you have got a warning letter, which is the escalation of getting a 43 if they feel that you have not taken appropriate action, so there are still issues which could not be resolved within the time frame, and there are health risk to the general public or caregivers, right? That's when they decide to give you a warning letter. So what is the impact of these things? If you look at last 5 to 6 years, we have had many such cases in the industry. And what I've seen from some of our major customers, the impact has been that the whole company has to like move in fixing this problem because they are time bound. They are from a regulatory body, so they need to be focused. And since there's a lot of attention given to this, there has been many cases where the folks who are really assigned to design and develop new products, right? They had to move to, resolve the kappa, help regulatory, right? Uh, so what we talk about here are some tangible impact, but I think there has been a lot of intangible impacts, from the mind of the folks who are working in this industry, uh, which would eventually results in any of the four things, right? So one of them is regulatory consequences. Second, high financial impact, operational disruptions, market and reputation damage. So we'll talk about each one of them. So regulatory consequences, as you know that some of the points which FDA or any regulatory body will find in your process or in your documentation, you could have found them already. I would say 80, I would apply 80-20 rule here. Most 80% of the things would have been really fixed if you as a company would have paid enough attention, if you would have done internal audits, not just for sake of doing internal audit thoroughly, right? Uh, Many times, Lauren and I have multiple experience where we have looked at 43s and, everybody looks at them and say that these are very basic things. This could have been fixed, right? But, if you are from a quality function or regulatory or clinical, that's the advice from us is to make sure that, do your things rightly when nobody is really watching you, ensuring that you are complying to the regulatory guidelines, standards, and ensuring that those are really implemented in your quality management system. If not, then you will have high financial impact. One of the example which is very recent is Philips. Almost 1.1 billion settlement, and on top of that, there have been more expenses. Right? What it does to a company is like Philips, which is one of the largest company in the world, is to it hits the innovation, right? So eventually, you're not getting those products out really quickly in the market, which patients and caregiver needs, because company has to focus their attention to fix these problems and give required money to the folks who are affected. So this is one example. We have few other examples in the recent history in the next slide. You also have operational disruptions, right? Obviously, one of the reason we're talking about this subject is your weak QMS, quality management system has not been upgraded. It does not have effective way of doing things. I talked about internal audit. How do you really measure the effectiveness of CAPAs, right? There are quite a few different things which you could do or you could have done. Poor process controls, documentation, data integrity, right? These looks simple, but when you go deeper and implement them right appropriately, you will find that because of these issues which you could have fixed already, now you are going to fix it in a rapid time, right, which could have been fixed earlier. Market and reputation damage, which is probably the highest in my opinion here, because once you get warning letters, you are there in public domain, everybody knows about the issues, and they say, hey, this is a large company, and how can they have this very silly issue which they could have resolved, right? So you are damaging your market reputation, right? So overall, if you look at, these are the four major points, but there are many more. Eventually, you have to learn from the mistakes which others have done, or the gaps which others could have bridged, right? And with the ELSA AI, you have tons of information. I would recommend that you go spend time and make sure that take appropriate action so any of these four does not hit you. So these are some of the recent examples where organizations have been impacted. One of them is about St. Jude, 2016-17. The FDA action, reason for FDA action was kappa and device cybersecurity deficiencies. right? So the action taken was partial production halt and hence oversight. So this creates a lot of challenges. You have halt on your production, it going to affect the employees, right? Your supply base is affected, right? Look at the ripple effect of these changes, right? And eventually, in our industry, we work uh, for the patients and the caregivers, and they have the slowed supply, of some of these devices. Philips example we talked about, right? Sterigenics, ETO sterilization, compliance, and emission safety issues. So it's all not only the device manufacturers, but the entire network, right? So you have a third-party company you're using for sterilization, and you don't have many of them, and if they uh, have a permanent factory shutdown, which is the case here, you need to identify when you supplier, validate them. You can just see the amount of problem you're going to face, and there would be a business loss in all these cases. Zebra Biomet is 2015 example where the FDA action was because of installation and process validation failures. Operations was really paused for revalidation, and it resulted in having shortage of orthopedic implants, right, which nobody really wants to happen. So there are many more examples. I think you can Google and you can find out what really happened in these companies, what actions they have taken, right, to resolve their issues, and you can learn from them to make sure that you avoid these situations. This is one of the case study example from Abbott Medical. Right, and this all is from FDA website. So we have just recreated for the education purpose. So if you look at lack of inadequate processes, which Lauren talked about in one of our slides, is really consistent here. If you look at in 2009, they had three number, and then it's keep coming in 2010, 11, 12, and then there was a good gap of like 5 years, and then again it reappeared in 2017 and 2023 as well, right? So, we have a good maturity in 21 CFR Part 820, and then ISO 13485, right? So such things do not really happen. You need to have adequate QMS. But if you look at practically why these things happen, so my experience is that once you do an acquisition and you brought in another company, different QMS, and there's always debate of, do you really integrate the QMS or have them independently, right? So, and since these are sort of a change management decision, right? So I think if you put appropriate attention and make right decisions, if you and hard decisions, sometimes you have to make a hard decision like kill a QMS, right, and implement another one, or just bring the best of both to and implement it. So if you can take those hard decisions and at right time, you will not have to really face action from a health authority. Early identification, correction of procedural gaps could have prevented repeated observations. If you look at this consistently, the data represented highlights the need for strong procedural governance and periodic gap assessments. And as I said earlier, internal audit is very, very important. And based on my experience of last many years, that is taken very lightly, from both auditor perspective, internal auditors, as well as the people who are audited. So my suggestion is that, if you think that you want to put a rigor, you can use a third-party company to have an internal auditors, so that they will bring an outside perspective even before a health authority knocks your door, right? So you get an outsider view, right, in time to correct some of these things. Recommended actions: strengthen procedural clarity through periodic SOP reviews, routine QMS gap assessments, clear process ownership. That's very important aspect, right? So you have multiple functions, right? Make sure that you involve those functions when you are writing the procedures appropriately, get their buy-ins. So when you get their buy-in, they will know what informations or feedback they have provided you, and they'll be far better accepted, when they fill up the forms or apply procedures when they do the projects. Targeted training, very important aspect. I think this is another weak aspects where we lack providing appropriate training to the people. Many times it's just filling up the form, but you will have to really assess the person, do a questionnaire. It's an AI world these days. You can easily create a questionnaire, distribute, see the gaps in their understanding, redo the trainings if required, and have an ongoing effectiveness monitoring to prevent reoccurrence of the observations. So this is one example, and I think LCAI is a great tool. Spend some time there, rerun some of these charts. You can rerun some of these charts, pick the company name, and understand how they have been performing from last many years. So how we can help you and your teams and your network. So we can help you do findings analysis, right? So once you have got a 483 or warning letter, we can go deeper with you, have an outsider view, which Lauren always talked about. Bringing somebody like us in time really helps you to uh, get a fresh pair of eyes to see things differently. Many times we have seen that companies have this um, uh, understanding that everything seems to be right from us, right? But once impact has happened, you need to change your mindset and take actions quickly. Bring somebody from outside, let them do an assessment of your findings and warning letters. We can definitely help you there. Timeline, obviously now you're time bound, 15 business days to respond what you're going to do, right? So that becomes a very important piece. If you bring an expert from outside, they would have seen probably these things 50 times in their career. So they can interpret the wordings of health authority much better than you can do, and help you setting up the timeline for the fixing of these things. Kappa, I think, as Lauren said multiple times, that this is there's a lot of findings around these. Right, we can help you look at your Kappa process, do improvements there, identify the right tool for you to implement, right? Build something on top of that tool to make sure that you have a measure of effectiveness. I think measure of effectiveness is very important. To implement the kappa and you're measuring, but is it really effective? Sometimes your effectiveness parameters were not really adequate. You might need to change them. So we can jump in and help you there. We can help you build your regulatory strategy, not only for this response, but going forward. This has happened, impact has happened that you are 483 buying later, but how do you make sure that you do not get into this issue going forward, right? So we can help you build a regulatory strategy for long term. We can help you uh, build your training infrastructure, uh, right content, for different levels, right? Making sure that training is not a burden. Training is something that folks who are doing work at the ground, they feel motivated to get trained, and training is such a way that it's little light, not very heavy, bulky, right? More descriptive, more pictures, more videos, right? So that they really understand. And obviously, we have an experience of many years of experience of different modalities. We have mostly worked on all of the therapeutic areas, right? And we have deep experts in many of those, which could really help you to make sure that you take right action in time. That's about it. So now we are open for questions. Lauren, before that, do you want to add anything for our audiences?
Again, I want to thank everybody for their time, but I would just say, Kuldeep, in listening to you, it's really shifting the perspective from, oh, compliance, oh, it's something we have to do, to how do you use your compliance as a strategic advantage? Talking about bringing somebody in from the outside to do your internal auditing, absolutely game changer. You're already looking at where you can strengthen before you get a health authority there. That becomes investing in your own strategy, investing in your time to market, and improving those things. So I think that that's just huge, and I've seen it be both a success metric, and I've seen organizations not take that time and really have it impact the time to market with their products.
No, that's a very good point. Absolutely. So I have first question from Albert, and Albert is really asking, uh, what are the timelines between 483s and warning letter? Is there any minimum timeline or maximum timeline? Right. So maybe you want to just answer that question, Lauren?
I'd be happy to. So with your 483, uh, Form 483, you should have some idea from your health authority who's been in the room with you what the areas are going to be. But once you receive that, you have that 15-day clock starts. And again, it's a voluntary response, but you want to respond or it will escalate to a warning letter. Again, when you get a warning letter, you have 15 initial days to respond. After that, as you're working through the process to remediate a warning letter, you then go to a 30-day clock, and your updates are due every 30 days to your health authority. And it will take multiple years to remediate a warning letter.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Lauren. Yeah, I can add. So, the best thing is that you start your planning very early. So as soon as you uh, know that health authority is going to visit you, so many times I've seen customers are involving external experts even during that time, so that you are really prepared well to face them, so that the overall timelines can be squeezed and you can meet the timelines. I think the early heads up's always good. I have a question from NG. Uh, she is asking about warning letters. Are warning letters just for the geography which this product is sold? So I think what she's saying, uh, let's say your product is designed and developed in US, and you're selling it in the Europe or any other uh, part of the world, right? So, and the issue is not within the US geography, which health authority has found. Let's say FDA has found. Uh, do you think you will get a warning letter because of the issues not within the country but outside of the country?
So I believe when we showed that FDA dashboard slide, it shows the foreign inspections as well as the local inspections. Yes, you can get a finding even outside of the geography. Um,
Hmm.
it's they're really coming in to look at often the US manufacturers and your processes, but something can be a trigger from another geography.
Okay, understood. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So I think the if you have gaps, be it any geography, so you will definitely have to fix it because it may not be within the jurisdiction of the health authority right now, but it may. So it's always the global perspective if you have the global operations.
Especially when you think of MDSAP, right? And all of the
Definitely.
countries are in the medical device single audit program, right? You have US as well as Japan, as well as Canada, as well as, right? You've got all of these different. So the idea of the FDA just coming in and just looking at the US, I think is an older thought. Yeah. And that it's really more global now. Things happen globally.
That's correct. I have next question from Vaishali. She's asking, how does FDA classify observations?
So they do it according to the CRF, right? It's going to show you what area they identified that observation in, design controls, procedures, this, that, according to their CRF. This is why the idea where I keep stressing on your kappas, your kappas, your kappas, it's not necessarily that they're going to find a fault with your kappa process, but they are going to use your own internal investigations where you've opened up kappas and they're going to say, oh, well, this ultimately is a design control issue. Oh, this I see is a training issue. So it lines out to the for medical device, the 820 CRF. It will go, they tie it to the regulations. And then from there, right? So that's the observation. And then the classification is based upon your response to the 483. If they're going to say this is voluntary or mandatory, right? That you address the observation.
Great, thank you. I agree with that. Next question is from Jewel, and it's a little longer. So, do you have the chat, Lauren? If you can just click on your chat and read the question, if you may.
Mhm. This is, and first of all, thank you for this question. It is, so the question is basically, what are my thoughts on the future of the ELSA tool and how it's going to shape uh, how the agency, the FDA agency, what their steps are, and how an organization can prepare. And I would say use the tool they're using. While you may not have ELSA, chances are your organization has some AI tool. You want to make sure that the AI tool that you leverage in your organization, you want to check with your legal team. You want to check with everybody first because you want it to be private and you want it to be secure. Whatever AI tool you're using, you want to use the tool that is approved for your organization. And I would say, great, if we know they're using, what information do we supply outside organizations? Let me take that information, plug it into my secure AI tool and ask it questions based on this information. Where's a weakness? Where would you find an observation? If I'm looking at this from the FDA's point of view and I want to make sure I comply with CRF 820, right? Plug that in. Start using your own internal AI tool or work with us, right? Come to us and say, what do you think? Because it's about asking the right question, making sure it's got the data, and then it's no different than your CAPA program. You want to identify your weaknesses first. Those are my thoughts.
Great. No, excellent point, Lauren. I agree with you. So we have no more questions, and I think we're almost at the time. So I would like to thank everyone for uh, joining the webinar. As I said, both Lauren and I are there on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. You have our email ID, and a replay of this webinar will be put onto our YouTube channel. So you can always revisit, listen, or share with your coworkers or network if they would like to learn more about this. And feel free to ask questions if you have any. Lauren, do you want to say a few words before we wrap up?
I would just want to say thank you so much to everybody who has attended and your interest. It's obviously an area where we have a lot of passion. And my last thought is just that switch the mindset. Make us your strategic advantage. Make your compliance, your proactive compliance, your advantage.
Great. Those are good points, Lauren. Thanks. Thank you for joining with me and doing this great webinar. And thanks everyone for your time. Take care.